I'm really proud of myself for getting up early in the morning, but for this work, which you and I, Jeremy, are both really passionate about, I think me and you will do anything to get this word out. So before I continue, my name is Dr. Tova Goldfein. This is TMS Roundtable Recovery. We've been streaming live here for close to 5 years. And originally with my partner and a co-host, Rose Hoy from Australia, who passed away last summer. We always dedicate these shows and this healing to her neshama, which is soul in Hebrew, to her amazingly rich and beautiful and deep, magnificent soul. She always loved to heal like me. And so I continue in her merit. Jeremy, before you speak, I just need to introduce you, and she'd be really good at this. Rose would read everything about you and then do a whole little spiel. And I do that too, but I have my own way and Rose had her way, and this is my way. So I found you on Eddie's page, and it was like what he said about you, which was kind of like, Buzz, let me go check out Jeremy. And then I saw what you were doing, and I saw your story, and I read, and I thought, there are so many people healing. I mean, Sarno's books are in 30 languages. And I see and meet the people that are healing from indirectly and directly his work. And your story is so profound and so full of healing insights. But most important is that you've taken the time to write a blog. And you also, without being a coach, you want people to get it, to get what we call the big idea. So we're here to talk about the big and little idea of healing. Jeremy, thank you so much for blessing my studio.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for giving a voice to people like me. I think sometimes, there is some value just to the average, guy that's out there battling through this. And,
You're not average, but go ahead.
Well, I've been at this for 10 years and, I do feel like I've learned some things along the way. And I felt like I did have, it did come up on the 10-year anniversary of kind of my discovering Sarno and having this real profound healing, discovery. And 10 years later, looking back, I've only just improved upon that and expanded upon what I know and what I know works. And I just thought it would be a good time to kind of give back a little bit and share that and kind of go into some greater detail, because it's just so hard. You know how these TMS Facebook groups work and things like this, and people have questions and you give an answer and then there's 20 other answers. It's really hard to go deep, or and different things work for different people. And I do know that my approach is not the same as everyone's approach, and I just thought it was worth sharing. So I appreciate you giving a voice to people like me.
Yeah, and I'm going to advertise on my Facebook, because your blog is called Mindful Cures.
Correct. Mindfulcures.com is my relatively new website that I kind of started. I originally wrote my kind of long healing story just from the beginning, how my pain started and how I discovered Sarno and how I cured. It was on I was kind of doing a travel blog. We were doing some traveling in an RV and like living on the road at the time. And this kind of happened when we were on the road. So it was kind of one of my blogs. And it was sort of interesting. My blog was mostly just this thing where we kind of shared what we were doing with friends and family. And I kind of wrote, where we were and shared pictures. And then I kind of shared this blog, and then kind of that word went out. And really, that's the only blog I ever wrote there that anyone ever really read, because, it kind of got some traction with the TMS group. So I decided to kind of, maybe I would move that story onto its own website, kind of expand upon that with kind of what I've learned in the last 10 years. So that's kind of where the Mindful Cures website came from.
It's beautiful. And it's really, it's well done. And the pictures are beautiful. And you can see that you have a purpose to express. So it is something interesting in your healing, because so much of healing is about repressing. So much of being sick, of being ill or being imbalanced is repressing. Mm-hmm. Here, not only were you able to heal, but you also continue to express. So I just want to put that out there. the quantum field. So go ahead and
Sure.
tell us from the beginning, like,
Mhm.
you grew up a certain way and then TMS and symptoms. We'd love to just hear a timeline of what went on.
Yeah, that's always one of those. When did your TMS start? I'm like, when did I first recognize being alive, I guess, for me? I think they go back a long time. I think in hindsight, I recognize TMS in different forms for me that go all the way back from stomach aches in school to chronic headaches and sinusitis and infections and chronic illness and things like that. And that kind of morphed, and I did some things and started discovering mind body medicine, started discovering mindfulness, really had a lot of success tackling some of that stuff. And in a lot of ways was having success with some mild depression that I had developed over the years. And as an adult, you kind of get into that, like, what am I doing with my life? Is this really the career I want? Am I making a difference? All those kind of things. And really didn't have much of any kind of chronic pain as I'm dealing with depression type things. And mindfulness and discovering meditation, and that really kind of brought me out of that. And for the most part, I quit my job, and my wife and I are like decided to follow our passion, and we decided to hit the road, sell our house, quit our jobs, and we're going to live in an RV and just try to be mindful and live simply and all that. And really, I'm feeling great, emotionally doing really well. And about that time is when this chronic pain starts setting in, and I start
So
developing,
interesting.
yeah, the real low
Yeah.
back pain kind of starts, just creeping up. I'm playing golf, I'm living this regular life, and I've got this a little bit of back pain. And, I've got relatives that have chronic back pain and have, the degenerative disc disease. So that's nothing really surprising to me. I kind of held off on getting it diagnosed, kind of lived with it, fought through it, and then it just got a little bit worse. And so I decided to seek a chiropractor for that. And really, that was not a good thing in hindsight. I went straight down the list. I got the formal diagnosis of the DDD and the
How
X-rays.
old were you? How old were you,
I would
Jeremy?
have been in my 30s, I guess, probably in my mid to late 30s. It was probably my mid 30s when I'm 49 now. It's probably in my mid 30s when I started having the problems. Probably in my mid to late 30s when I first started seeing a chiropractor for that, which really it got worse at that time. I dropped the chiropractor kind of on my own just after a while because I was like, this is not helping. I'm not getting better. But I kept up most of the exercise program and all the stuff that I was doing to alleviate this pressure on the discs, that problems that I had, and I was doing most of that on my own. And I kind of go into all this detail on my website, my healing story, but just kind of was not getting better and overall getting worse. And I just didn't know what to do about it. And just out of nowhere, Sarno comes along. I start reading the book, and it just starts clicking just very, very quickly
Wow.
for me. Um, Within probably before I finished reading the book, I was having some real profound experiences. Because at this point, I was having,
Unbelievable.
I had a broken shoulder that had given me problems, and I couldn't, I'd get to about here and it would just be agonizingly painful. I had the, kind of just throbbing low back pain that was kind of persistent most of the time. But if I played any kind of golf at all, I mean, it would just be laying in bed at night, and that just boom, boom, boom pounding. I would wake up 3 or 4 mornings a week just with this like, oh, I slept wrong, and I'd walk around, the whole day like that, where couldn't move your neck at all. So it was just a lot of those little nagging things. I had plantar fasciitis pain in my foot, so I'd walk around, and some days that would just be
Wow.
like that, right at the base of my foot would be locked up, and just all of these things. And you kind of you start living with it, and you don't even realize how much pain you're in on a day-to-day basis, and you just sort of live with it
Wow.
until you don't. And then you start having these revelations about emotions and repressed emotions. And ultimately for me with Sarno, he was just like, your mind has the ability to control your body. And that was the big light that went off for me. I can do this myself.
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt because I just want people to hear. So many of us are so frustrated because we don't have this kind of book cure. And I'm not saying you had a book cure, but you read it and something happened in that process. And it does that for a lot of people, and then they can't hold on to it. So maybe you can just stop there and share what for you happened in the reading. What did you just click? What clicked for you? And then you were able to hold on to that and utilize that for further healing.
Yeah, and so I will say that I did have some pretty profound, uh, experiences like that where, I wake up for the first time and I start scanning my body. I was already a meditator. Meditation was not anything I did to cure TMS. It was something I was already doing. I was probably doing a better job with meditation when my back pain was the worst than I'm doing right now. So I can't tell you that that's my cure. It's really not. But I was very aware. I'm aware of my body, aware of things. So when I started putting two and two together with the Sarno information and started doing my normal body scans, started looking at my pain with a different perspective, it started affecting me less. Now, I can't say is that my initial experience stayed. It probably took 3 to 6 months before it became what I consider it is now, which is very, very permanent, very, very stable. I'm not battling recurring symptoms on an ongoing basis whatsoever. I really am not. And that's regardless of my emotional state, regardless of stress. But there was a time where I was still in that back and forth state. But Sarno for me, I never went back to a negative place. After discovering Sarno, my attitude was positive. And I know not everybody likes the idea of positive thinking or can say, oh, it's not,
How about that?
you can't have
Let's
positive
after
thinking.
in honor of my podcast this week with Dr. Hanscom. His big thing is safety. You are continually able to move into safety.
That's very true. I think that was the biggest key for me, is that I no longer was in this fear that these discs in my back were causing problems. So even if I was still having pain or experiencing pain, it was much lessened based on the fact that there wasn't fear associated with it any longer. And it gave me permission to fight through it, which is the exact opposite of what the chiropractor had said, which was saying, this is a warning sign, you've got to back off, you've got to not do that. Sarno said, do the opposite. He said, go out, play all the golf you want. I went out and I put my bag right on my back and said, I'm going to walk today. And it was probably not the most comfortable thing I ever did, but I did it anyway. And I did it to prove to myself that I could. And when I did that, I felt like $1,000,000. And the more I did that, the more permanent that became. Now I carry my bag on my back because that's how I like to play, and because I can cut through the woods without having to take the push cart way around, the long way. So it's
So
a
I
mindset
want to
for
say
me.
something. So right there and then, because I'm thinking of a particular client right now who, will, because even as a chiropractor, I think Sarno. I'm a different animal, as people notice. I'm not your typical chiropractor, and an adjustment is a very good thing, but for a lot of people, it's not to get rid of the pain. It's to relax the spine or get the nervous system functioning. And chiropractic is great for acute problems, but for chronic TMS, it's not the answer. So in honor of that, I want to say to the people that, okay, doc, well, I go out and I went walking and I couldn't do it and I had to sit down because I was a number 10 pain. What would you say as somebody in the field, in the game, running, accomplishing it, succeeding it, seeing it behind you, seeing the pain has decreased? What kind of advice would you give to people that are out there walking with the sciatica, or dealing with the neck pain, or going to work with the headaches, and it's not going away like it was for you? What would you think is going on in their unconscious mind that they can't have this experience like you? Can you talk a little bit about, did you ever walk with the bag and you really hurt yourself and you really just stopped walking because it was too much?
Well, sure. First of all, when you talk about someone that's on the scale of 10, I've been laid up with back spasms where there's no playing golf, there's no getting up to go to work, there's no doing anything. You can't move. I mean, you're completely locked up. And I've even had one or two of those post Sarno. So I know everything. I know completely that this is, a harmless thing. It's not based on my back, but I'm still locked up. I can't move. Like I said, it's been probably a year or so since I've had one of those, and maybe I've had one or two in 10 years since, and I used to have them regularly. So it's very, very different. But I'm not telling anyone that's in that situation, oh, you just need to stand up and walk. It's not that simple. It really isn't. I would suggest that people push it. I wouldn't suggest that you just sit there and go, oh, I have to wait till I feel perfectly good to get up and move. I don't think that's good advice, and that's not what I did anyway. I mean, it's very hard for me to say. I'm not a TMS practitioner. I'm just sharing what works for
No, but
me, and I
like,
would say
right. So,
push it.
what? Right. Okay. Push it. Like, to me, push it. And, that this is a big question that we see a lot, is like, how far do we push?
Yep. And
What would you suggest we'd be thinking? What would you be thinking if you're pushing a little bit? What's going to be going on in your mind as you're
yeah,
pushing a
so
little bit?
I would say that one of the most common things that I see with people that have trouble with a more permanent, or that they'll have some kind of early success. They'll recognize TMS. They'll read the book like I did. They'll say, "Oh, I've got to think emotionally. This isn't because of my golf swing. This is because of emotions." They'll start looking at day-to-day stressors. I think that a lot of people tend to then trade physical for emotional. So that'd be the first thing I'd look at. Are you sort of, is there any chance that you are in pain because you're expecting to be in pain based on this emotion that you're experiencing? And I know that I do some little informal coaching with people behind the scenes and have, on and off for years. And that's one of the things that I've discovered. People say, I've got this thing coming up. I've got this big stressful, and I know it's going to trigger this, and I know it's going to do this, and I have to figure out what to do to prepare it. And I'm like, is it really causing it, or are you expecting it to cause it, and is that what's doing it? Like, I'm at the point where now, like, a stressful event, just, it wouldn't cross my mind for that to cause pain. But for a lot of people, that's really different. There's so many different triggers where they have an expectation. And I listened to Dr. the Hanscom thing you did yesterday also, and he said that your brain learns pain. That's a learned thing in your brain, and I completely agree. So you're kind of just expecting to be in pain based on something that that's happened before, and you can unlearn that same reaction. And I think
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
people are often missing. They're probably um, almost expecting to be in pain, or not expecting not to be in pain. So I would say that when I was waking up each morning after Sarno and experiencing my healing, which was very fast, is every single morning I woke up, I expected to feel like $1,000,000. Whether I did or not was somewhat irrelevant. It was sort of,
Right.
I didn't care. I expected to feel good, and I didn't. And I use a lot of golf analogies and sports analogies in my stuff and my website. And that's what you have to do to play good golf. You have to expect to play very well, but not care at all when you don't. And that's how you get your best performance in golf. And I think that's how you
That's
get your
it.
best performance with TMS as well.
That's it. It's and in honor of Buddha,
Yeah.
it's like no expectations. I mean, can you imagine if we lived life? Because we're talking about radical acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
or you know, um, I even love to call this awareness. Radical awareness, like this awareness of, oh, there's me putting pressure on myself to heal, or there's me frustrated that I don't feel as good as I want to feel. So it's that, like, am I in reality? Am I fighting reality? And can I accept that I created this reality? I created this reality where I'm in pain. So I'm not blaming myself, but I created this experience, and let me see how I can shift gears in that
Yep.
experience.
I think
So I
that's
wanted
I
to,
think I think that's right. I think there's a huge thing, and you can't, you have to have high expectations, but you have to be very accepting if you don't meet those. But you also have to be very careful, because you can't develop this sort of limiting belief that having this higher level of success probably isn't possible. Or, I've heard people say that you can cure by reading or cure by a psychological cure by mindset, but yeah, I kind of highly doubt that. You can really set yourself up with these limiting beliefs, and you're never going to achieve what you want to achieve if you don't think it's possible. So I would warn people to be very, very careful. Even if you're not achieving everything you think, don't assume, or, I think people are often trying to reassure people by saying, oh, don't expect to get better. Don't expect to get better. And I sometimes go, no, do expect to get better. Be okay if you don't, but it's okay to expect to get better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're explaining the placebo. You're giving a definition for the placebo. Like it's, and I call it maybe don't negotiate with your brain. Don't negotiate with your brain. Your brain's like, protecting you.
Correct.
And Hanscom talked about like the power of that protective mechanism. It's like so much more powerful than anything that, that unconscious, I think he was talking about the unconscious powerful thoughts, and that
Sure.
the brain, I always get a little confused about, what's like which part of the brain, but it's the conscious brain that's protecting and fight or flight. And he's talking about the power of that and coming, and obviously the unconscious mind's feeding that. So this is something very, very key here. And I want you to talk about it more, but I want to ask you, because most of us know, and obviously you had your own experience with your repressed emotions and what seems to be like, I'm okay with this, but down deep inside, people are in war. So can you talk about how you were able to access your deeper emotions, whether it was anger or fear, and how you made friends with that?
Sure. So I think for me that one of the things that might be a little bit different, I think there's other people that talk about that. I don't dig at emotions. I don't like spend a lot of time. I'm very aware of emotions. I have done journaling. I've worked with counselors in the past. Like I say, went through some mild depression stuff before I ever really developed the chronic pain stuff. So I kind of am familiar with doing that. But with respect to the TMS symptoms, I definitely do not look for emotions to try to solve TMS. I'm aware of them. I'm aware that repressed emotions, I'm aware that day-to-day stressors, I'm aware that past emotions, all those things are part of this reservoir that creates these symptoms. But I don't try to pinpoint one thing. I definitely don't try to resolve them. I don't try to change my personality in order
Excellent.
to fix things. I don't do any of those things. It's very much awareness. And I think that's one of the real brilliant parts of the Sarno books, and what I loved the most and what resonated the most with me is he was insistent that you don't have to do that. He's like, I kind of discovered this, but and all of his stuff was through observing other people. And I think he was as surprised as anybody. He's like, for whatever reason, I tell people about this and they get better. So I started doing lectures, and then sure enough, they bring their husband or wife and they get better. It's just information cures them. And he kind of tapped into that. And I was just like, man, that's it. That's it right there. I don't have to fix myself. I don't have to figure out what's going on. I don't have to change who I am. I don't have to eliminate stress. I don't have to do anything. I just have to be aware of this and then go ahead and activate my power over this. And it's really our innate power over this. I think some people think you have to change who you are to overcome this. And you have to basically strip away what you've become and go back to this more natural state to heal.
Beautiful. I mean, said in two ways. One is like, I feel people need to evolve in a way, or and then Dispenza talks about, breaking the habit of being yourself. I mean, it has to be a shift. It has to be a shift,
I agree.
whether it's an acceptance, whether it's an awareness, something has to shift, but we're not changing who we are. There's this loving, and, I think I keep calling it accepting. There's this, I am who I am, because you can't, there's also a conflict in the body that prohibits healing if you're conflicted inside. I hate
Absolutely.
my body. I hate my back. I hate this. I hate this. the, the brain's going to use that for protection. So again, I'm moving back into like, what about many of these people that you and I, bump into in our, and we're on the Facebook, and what about some of these people that are stuck? What would you suggest
Yeah,
that
so
they do?
I suggest in that, and I think a couple of my blogs cover that very specifically, but people are really in your head. They have that TMS story, and that's what you kind of described there, and that's just all bouncing around, whether that's, initially it could be the physical story. It's like, oh, what did I do to myself? Whether I was in that car accident and, this or that. And then later on, it becomes more of that emotional story, but it's all of this information bouncing around in their head and all this stress, and what they need to do is be able to get out of their head. And that's where I talk a lot about what works for me is if I'm in some kind of pain, I like to go into that sort of meditative awareness and really sort of strip away the thinking part of it. And it's very hard to describe to people that aren't meditators or haven't spent a lot of time with mindfulness or spent a lot of time not thinking in words. I mean, I guess what I would describe is I didn't realize at one time that you actually can sort of exist and be in the present moment without talking to yourself in your head, without this running
Wow.
dialogue that's sort of sitting there going, what is this pain? What am I doing? Like you think that's thinking, you think that's being aware, you think that person is you. But in my experience, that person, that discussion, that dialogue is not you. That's sort of that subconscious brain just chattering beyond that. And if you can kind of learn to silence that and observe things more in the present moment, for what they really are without all that chatter, you see them very, very differently. And when you start looking at your pain, you start looking even at your emotions or how you feel. If you're feeling anxiety, what does anxiety feel like without telling yourself a story about anxiety? What does it just feel like to sit there and experience anxiety, to feel it for what it is? Same with pain, same with stress, same with sadness, anything like that. And I feel like the more you can learn to observe those, not ignore them, not push them out of your existence, but feel them and observe them on a real level of felt perception, the less power they have over you. And also the more that you can just recognize that voice in your head as something separate from you and not you, and that you can shut it off and you don't have to listen to it, and it doesn't have to dictate who you are. You can be more in control of that than a lot of people are aware, and that's what I would focus on for these
So
people.
powerful. I really need you to talk about that some more, please, because felt perception was a word I learned from the presence process
Yeah, I've done that
from
one a
this guy
couple
named
times.
Michael.
I think I learned that through some of the TMS mentioned somewhere, but I've done that
Yeah, well,
process.
Michael
Mhm.
Galinsky turned me on to it, and he promoted it. And we did a couple shows about it, and it was really profound in that felt perception. It was like I wanted to look it up on Google. Felt perception,
Yeah,
maybe because whatever you just said was so profound. I would love you to say it again
sure.
because you're asking all of us to to find other pathways to our thoughts, to our deeper selves, and kind of please repeat it again.
Yeah, sure. So, what I like to consciously do is kind of go ahead and take a look at all these thoughts that are swimming around in your head. So, you're feeling you're stuck in some recurring pain, and you're not having success resolving it. You've read the books, you've done the journaling, you've done the meditation, whatever, and it's just not working. How do you approach that? And I would encourage people to try to kind of strip away all of the story, the mental story they have about their symptoms, about their feelings, and feel it directly. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? What does anxiety feel like in your body? What does that sensation feel like? What does back pain feel like? What does your back spasm feel like? Is it running up and down your spine? Is it shooting up and down your leg? How is that doing? And then just observe it without affecting it. You just really take a deep look at it, and you don't have this scared story associated with it. You just are very unattached to it, and you're looking at it. But I also then would add, you can look at it with the added lens that this is sort of a subconscious distraction, and you're kind of just watching this play kind of go out. This isn't a real pain that is a warning about anything. It's just a TMS pain. So look at it with that perspective as well, but without overthinking it, not with this big story, but just sort of with this perceptive nature. And that's what I would encourage people to do.
Would you call that the witness, like witnessing it?
Yes, absolutely. You're the observer, and you can observe the pain. You can observe some of the story going on in your head, and you can kind of even step away from that. You can even say, okay, I can't really stop this conversation going on in my head, but let's just watch it for a while. And is that really me? And what you kind of realize is that at the end of the day, like, I'm not that person. That's something kind of going on. That's part of all this stuff. That's part of all this stuff that's going on in the world, the environment that influences that. But at the end of the day, that's not really me. I'm something separate from that. And that person that's separate from that doesn't really have all this chronic pain, doesn't really have all this chronic anxiety.
Jeremy, first of all, that's like a lot of PRT. It's a lot of hypnotherapy. It's a lot of somatic tracking. It's all of that, because you're basically having this relationship with your body and brain. And, we talked with Anscombe about, like, you're not your thoughts, which is a big thing with the power of now, the Eckhart Tolle work, even with the Byron Katie work, where, you can question your thoughts. Like, does that thought serve me? There are thoughts that are pretty helpful. Well, then put that in a file. But they are an energetic, that's a whole nother. I find that fascinating how you phrased it and how you were able to package it for you. And it is mindfulness. It is awareness.
Yeah, it definitely is. But it's not exactly what other people always probably think about for mindfulness. And I think for meditation, I think that gets it's a real tough one too, because like I said, I don't think you can meditate your way out of a lot of these problems, but it's absolutely crucial for me. And I've been meditating for a long time, and I started meditating for the absolute wrong reasons and didn't have a lot of success. I started meditating for stress relief. I started meditating because I wanted to be better at golf. Just all these sort of like superficial goals that in hindsight, I realize aren't the reason you meditate. You meditate to have better control of your mind, to have better ability to turn these thoughts on and off on command. Like you say, it's not bad to think, but you have to be in control of when you're thinking, and you have to be in control of when you don't want to think or overthink. And that in itself doesn't cure the chronic pain, because like I say, I think I was doing almost a better job of that when I was in the chronic pain. I just was missing the knowledge piece. I just was not aware that this back pain was at all mind-body curable or anything like that. I thought I had a disc disease that was going to take me out. So you have to have the knowledge, but then you combine it with the mindfulness, and you've got a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah, really amazing. Really, really amazing. And there are so many people I've been blessed to talk to about their healing stories. And this is quite your story. It's so 1,000% Jeremy story, because it's really how you came into this freedom. You came into understanding the lion under the bed is just a toy lion.
Mm-hmm.
You were calm with your, look, because I think what I wanted to say was one of Sarno's big keys is accepting 100%, 1,000% that this is psychological.
Sure.
And how many people are not getting to where they need to be because one foot's in the medical world? It's okay. Go get an MRI. The MRI will say something. Yours said a lot at age 30. I can't imagine a generation like that at age 30. Here comes one of these spams that come on. And what I do after the show is I block the person, because I don't want how they find my. Anyway, sorry about that. I'm not responding to you. But anyway, let's focus. There's my focus.
Let's all just go get some mushrooms. Problem solved.
Yeah. Anyway, well, listen, the mushrooms are right here. Right here in the studio. So Sarno says, Jeremy, it's not for me to say this to someone, as a mind body doctor. Well, you need to 1,000% be 1,000%. It's psychological. Well, doc, the pain is real. The pain is real. It's just being processed in your brain. And the MRI says this. So, how do you, because you've counseled people, what do you say to people with that
Yeah, that's probably
intention?
the hardest thing. I think I much prefer counseling people that already know they have TMS but are having trouble getting better. I think the people that are questioning whether or not their symptoms are TMS are the hardest people to help, to be quite honest, because I do think that's something you have to kind of come to yourself. Like somebody can't tell you, like I can tell you, yes, you have TMS, but it really doesn't matter what I think. Only matters what they think as far as TMS goes. So it's one of those things they have to come to it on their own. And, like they can be like, oh, I have this MRI, I have this, and I'm just not sure. And I could be like, oh, that's definitely TMS, just read the thing. But they have to come to that on their own. So for me, it was just doing the research. I got the Sarno books. I started reading the reviews and then started digging into the healing stories. And, after a while, it was absolutely impossible for me to believe that my former belief about the back pain could be true. It just wasn't possible. The evidence did not lead me there. In my line of work, I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm fairly logical minded, even though I'm fairly in touch with some of the subconscious and spirit stuff. I'm also a very logical person. If stuff doesn't add up, it doesn't add up. And unfortunately, that's what happened to me at the chiropractor. I was being told one thing, I was doing one thing, and I wasn't getting the results. So, you know, 1 and 1 didn't equal
Yeah.
2 in that situation for me. But when I kind of applied the Sarno stuff, it did start working and it started making sense. Like the stuff that didn't make sense did make sense. So the knowledge key was huge, and the back pain study research, the Hanscom work, doing any of those research studies that just prove that, there are all these people with these same disc herniations that I have that do not have pain. That was really big for me. And like I say, I was a skeptic. I didn't go into this just going, oh, I'm going to read this and be cured. I went into it reading it expecting to prove to myself that my pain was not mind body related. I read it very skeptically, very much expecting to figure out what I was missing, that explained why mine was not mind body related. But the more I read,
Yeah.
I wasn't even completely buying into it, but I was feeling better. So I'm like, how can this be? The knowledge itself was
Yeah.
curing me even without the belief, even without full
Yeah.
belief.
And as a chiropractor, I mean, that torque that you do when you play golf is an intense motion on the spine.
Sure.
It's actually an amazing motion. It's a beautiful range of motion to go from one, oblique to the other oblique. It's a beautiful motion. And for a lot of people, golf, so even that you're a golfer speaks miles about your exercise and your fitness and your ability. And again, I keep going to, and one of Rose's missions was when she first heard Dr. Schubiner say, well, 40% of the people aren't getting better. And so we were like, okay, Rose and I were like, let's keep talking to the 40% of the people, because, there are so many people who are in this work and getting discouraged. So they have nothing from the medical community. They're not getting what they need from the mind body community. And so they're lost. And we want to find those people and bring them back home. So
Sure.
again, you have enormous ability to go deeper without being so emotional, because you're very clear, you're very practical,
Mhm.
and this is counterintuitive pain. This is not black and white. So how did you manage? Because again, and that was the mindfulness helped you to make friends with that.
Sure. Yeah. So some of the pain management, I guess, goes back for me. The chronic pain was newer, but I've had some success with other mind body related stuff that go back a long time, with acute pain, with injuries, type stuff like that. I think I figured out a long time ago that your mind can do pretty incredible things with your body. And that ultimately your brain is just signals that tell your body to be in pain. So I think I had a lot of like acute pain management control, which I think it helped me before I discovered Sarno. I could kind of just fight through some of this chronic pain stuff that way. So, but I don't know. I wish I had a better way to explain it, but I do feel like I'm very in touch with that mind body connection. I think it's very, very difficult. Some people will explain, your mind is in your body are these things, and your mind can control your body, and you can influence allergies, you can influence hearing, you can influence eyesight, you can influence, all these things. And most people are like, oh yeah, right. And I go, I want to learn more. I might not know how to do it, but I just want to learn more about that. I have no doubt in anything. Like, I'm not limited by my belief in that. I'm very fascinated and very curious in that respect. And I think that's a huge thing for people. If you're not overly curious, you're going to struggle with these kind of alternate cures like this. So, if you can figure out a way to tap into some kind of curiosity or intellectual like interest, that would be really something I would suggest for people.
Good suggestion. How do you feel about doubt? I mean, what do you think about the doubt? I think that's hurting some of the people, this doubt, that they're able to shift the mindset.
Yep. So what I would say about doubt, and I think I talk about it more in terms of limiting belief, which I think is very much the same thing. But I think there's two types of things. One is the first step is accepting your diagnosis, accepting that whatever you have is TMS, and that's the first doubt that you have to deal with, and that's the one you hear talked about fairly often, and it's pretty common. You've got to not doubt your symptoms. You have to believe your symptoms. I think belief for me is a little bit of an overused term, because I think belief without knowledge is sort of irrelevant. So your doubt goes away when you have the knowledge that's required to kind of eliminate any of that doubt. But then the second part of doubt that I think is more overlooked is the doubt that you have the innate ability to overcome that using your mind. And I think people spend a little bit too much time waiting to be cured and a little bit too little time curing themselves personally. And I don't know if that makes complete sense, but it's not a passive thing for me. And I know that is challenging.
What do you mean?
I think that's challenging for some people, but I think you can go ahead and decide that you're kind of done with this and make that happen a little bit more than people realize.
What do you mean, like passive and active? Like, how much do people need to participate? Like, show up for themselves, come out of their comfort zone. Is that where you're heading with that?
So I write, one of my blogs is called Getting into the Zone, and it's basically one of those sports analogy blogs, but it talks about, comparing it to how golfers prepare for a big tournament. They learn psychology. They learn the type of psychology that is required to perform at a high level. And I think you can learn the type of psychology that's required to heal yourself from these things as well. And I think you can sort of cultivate that within yourself more actively than most people realize. It's not just, eliminate the doubt and sit back and wait for yourself to be cured. You can do that a little bit more actively than most people realize. Now, again, it's not like a light switch. You can't just go, I'm going to be better and then be better, because you'll just kind of make yourself a little crazy with that. But it's like I said before, I do think there is some amount of waking up one day and saying, enough is enough. I'm done being a victim of this. I'm done having my life dictated by this. I'm taking control. I'm going to take the reins from here on out, and I'm going to stop being a victim of this. I'm going to stop feeling sorry for myself. I'm going to stop, any of this. I'm done. I'm going to lead myself out of this hole.
That's belief. I mean, that's belief. That's trusting. That's awareness. That's
it's empowerment. It's really the word I use a lot. It's really self-esteem and self-empowerment. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have not learned self-esteem with anything in life. So all of a sudden you're asking them, much later in their life to be empowered and to have all this self-esteem and to take control of their healthcare. And it's a very foreign concept because it's not anything they've ever done in anything else in their life. And I think that's kind of a mistake. And I think it's something that we need to be working on at much younger ages with respect to self-healing and taking control of your own healing and a lot of different aspects of life.
Yeah. And do you think, Jeremy, that, we won't go into this heavily, but, people do have a lot of trauma and big traumas, big T's and little T's, and people can pass them. People can move beyond their trauma or play out their trauma in a way that doesn't hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, do you feel that your symptoms came from something in your childhood, that you were sensitive, that you were bullied, or you're something that, were you able to look and say, well, I took that trauma with me into my adult, and what some people will say, well, I integrated it. Okay, so I have trauma. Okay, so it did this for me. It caused my body to attack my brain, my immune system to be on guard. And my nervous system was protecting me, and I got lots of inflammation. Where are you on the trauma piece
Yeah,
here?
so absolutely. I mean, I don't have a background of abuse or anything like that. I don't have any severe trauma in my background, but plenty. I mean, there's things that date back to very early childhood that every person. I think anybody that sits there and says, "Oh, I had a great childhood. There's no way repressed emotions are at play for me," is really, that's the person that's really fooling themselves. And I'm not that at all. I'm very aware that there are things that go all the way back to childhood, and I've dealt with some demons from my past formally, and all that. But with respect to the chronic pain, I don't spend a lot of time pinpointing that. I'm aware of these things, and I really kind of lean on like the presence process where it talks about that, because you will find a lot of these childhood stressors that just sort of come up over and over again. I find myself at work being very annoyed with something that happened there, and I'll realize this isn't what I'm annoyed with. This is just this recurrence of the same thing that's been going on since I was in kindergarten, where the teacher doesn't hear me or something like that. And you kind of just you recognize that, and it helps you kind of realize that these are just normal things, and it helps you let go of them a little bit if you realize that this is just a manifestation of these same stressors and same things going
Yeah.
on over and over again. And
Yeah.
recognition
Oh,
and acceptance is huge.
it's so important. I have a client, he told me something last night, and I was so upset. He told me that when he was little, he brought, he was older, maybe in high school, but he brought his paper to the teacher, and the teacher ripped it up in front of him because he forgot to put his name on it. And I was just like, oh my God. First of all, if that teacher thought she was teaching in that way, that was her method of teaching you to not forget to write your name.
Yeah,
But what trauma does one take away? And yet that's the teacher's issue. It's her issue. And
sure,
yet at that time, you're like, so I can see how little even things like that can cause someone. And he's
sure.
playing that out, that interaction. So
Yeah,
even about that teacher.
definitely. I think school stressors and things like that are a big part of, all that reservoir of emotions that can lead to all these things. Like I say, I think for the most part, and it's hard for me to say if someone comes from a very, very abusive background or has very, very serious stress, from the past, I might not be able to advise exactly as to what that entails. But I do think all of us have stress and trauma that dates back, and that does affect every one of us. Um, but at the same time, I really think that you see so many people advising that if you are in pain, that you have somehow not found or not resolved a past stress. And I really don't buy that. It's just not consistent with my experience at all.
Yeah. Jeremy, I so appreciate your profound opinions, and you have a beautiful way of expressing.
Thank you.
and you have clarity and ability to really put it out there in writing and in verbally in dialogue. I want to just put down www mindful cures
Correct.
mindful cures cures.com.
Yes.
And if people want to chat with you, if people want to reach you, they can reach you there. If they want to have a little Zoom with you or discussion with you, um, you're
Yeah, so I
available.
can do my best. I work full time. I'm very busy right now. I own my own consulting business. So I've gotten some worked with some people. It's usually easiest for me to provide like written feedback. I've had some people that have
Yeah,
contacted me in the past and said, here's what's going on. Do you have any insight? And then, if I can kind
yeah,
of get back with them then in the next day or two, it's a little harder for me to be available on call or for a lot
yeah.
of
No,
live
but
sessions
yeah,
and things like
yeah. I
that.
mean,
But yeah,
one of
I've
the
got
guys.
the Mindful Cures. I've got an email that's linked on there that you can send, and I
Beautiful,
answer. Comments are
beautiful,
appreciated on there. I've got a Facebook site for that. I'm not really promoting it much. Same for
okay,
all of this. I'm kind of in the process of creating content and getting it out there, but I have no expectation
beautiful.
of anything going viral, and don't really have probably time to deal with it if it did anyway. So
Right,
we'll do
right.
our
Well,
best.
this other guy that there's another guy that I don't know if Eddie got to him. He's called the Mindful Gardener. His name is Helmer Koronikowitz. He's a lovely guy. He's in
I've heard of that
Canada.
guy.
He
Hmm.
healed 70 symptoms, and he had me. I had him on my show a few weeks ago, and he's been interviewing a lot of people. He even got to interview Dan Buglio, and he's just on a mission, and he's got a full-time job, but he's on a mission, and he
People amaze
also
me.
yeah, and he has a group therapy for free, and again, he's giving you his shita, which in Hebrew it's like his vision, which is his vision, and he's more like black and white, and you've got I love the mindfulness because it's
Yeah.
so important, and I don't know if people are going to get there without they're going to, because look, we want to heal ourselves and ride that wave. We
Right.
don't want to keep bumping into the next symptom. We want to get to the bottom line and then build that muscle or that pathway.
Sure. Sure.
I think awareness and mindfulness is a key.
I do too. I think the more you are in control of those mind, thought, and mind, the more you're going to be able to recognize these, mind body illnesses and how to deal with them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's main focus with Mindful Cures is just to try to get as much of this information out there. I'd love to think that I might influence other people that go on to help other people. I do believe in that kind of pyramid effect where every little bit kind of spirals and makes a wave. So
Beautiful.
that's what I think we're all trying to do, and I really do appreciate your efforts. I mean, you're on this every day, and you're living this has got to be a lot, day in and day out. I have to take days off at a time of going on Facebook groups or doing anything like that. I have to separate from it, but I know you're very dedicated, and I applaud that.
Thank you. It's because of my trauma in my childhood. It's become a mission to help others. So I'm playing it out just like you at a different level, and same with Hanscom and all the other doctors and many of the other coaches. And look at all the people that have become coaches because their sense of, and yet you take the time and you write, and I think that the the back seat you take is even more effective in a way with your blog, and you're really giving back in so many ways, and I know that's helping you heal. It's helping your healing.
Yeah, writing these blogs for sure is very helpful for me. I think like I feel physically great when I'm like writing one of these blogs, and
Right, beautiful.
yeah,
Would you say that it's part of your
yeah,
journaling
it's a form of
practice?
journaling for sure. It's a
Yeah,
form of getting that out, it's setting reminders, reminding me of the type of mindset that is required, by formally writing that. And to be honest, a lot of what's in that website is regurgitated from things I wrote to people online. So I kind of
Wow.
copied and pasted, I was helping somebody through something and I kind of was like, this is kind of a blog. And then I
Yeah.
copy a couple
Yeah.
paragraphs and expand a little bit. And that's actually a lot of where that blog came from. But that whole
Really,
process is
I
very
think,
healing and helpful for me as
yeah,
well.
cathartic. I
Yes.
think the word might be cathartic, but I think that's a key. I think for people's journaling, I mean, lots of people ask me, how do I journal? I'm like, everyone has a personal
Hmm.
journaling method. And, like Hanscom's about journaling and ripping it up. I'm not suggesting to do that. You can, but you got me onto something here. What do you think that, people can blog and write their story, or um, write about how they look? It's therapeutic what you're doing. You're journaling in your blogs, and people could do that in a way
Hmm.
and even put it out there for others, because one of Sarno's thing was help another.
Yeah. So one of my
I think.
blogs was actually a journal that I wrote, and I originally shared that on that I think Eddie shared on the Mindful Cures. But one of my blogs is like how I journal about chronic pain, and it's very different than probably how other people journal, but it was actually what I wrote when I was in a chronic pain attack, and I kind of shared it on here. I was like, here's my form of journaling. Might not be exactly how you journal, but here's what I do. And that's one of the blogs that's on
Wow.
there that people might check out.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So I'm going to round this hour up. For
Great.
you, it's your nighttime. You're in Colorado?
Yeah. So I just moved back from California to Colorado. So it's just going on just
Yeah.
10 p.m. So about
Amazing.
wrapping up my week. I
Yeah.
was out last week. So this week has been a big catch up. I've had long work days. But
Right.
this was very fun. I appreciate you
Right.
having me
Well,
on.
yeah. Oh my God, Jeremy. Well, listen, if you ever have this need to express, just contact me and we'll get right on, an interaction, because you have so much to say and so much wisdom. And I am blessed, and there are people that will benefit from this in the cloud, in the airways. We have just been sending out enormous healing energy. So I appreciate that partnership with you
Well,
in this
thank you.
hour. And we'll stay in touch, and bless your heart.
Yes. Bless you. Thank you.
All, all the best. Have a wonderful night.
Bye now.
Okay.